Hi, and welcome to this video on writing an essay. Today we're going to be looking at writing introductions. This particular video is most appropriate if you're doing the AQA A-Level Lit B, because we're going to be looking at example questions from the protest paper. However, this will still apply if you are responding to questions on other courses. It might help you if you're doing a different course or a different specification to have an example exam paper in front of you so that you can use some of the questions from that, because the questions I'm going to be using in this are all protest questions. So as we start thinking about introductions, I tend to use three different components. This is not intended to be a straitjacket or a rigid recipe for you to follow. These are just some ideas to get you started and give you a bit of guidance for how to construct your introduction. It can be quite a daunting thing when you're looking at the blank page in the exam and you're thinking, how am I going to start this? So this gives you a bit of a hook to get you going. So firstly, I contextualize. I set the scene for the essay. Then I respond directly to the question, and then I make sure that I've conceptualized, so I've linked to key idea concepts. So just take a moment to read through that example on the left-hand side of the screen. So what you can see here is that in my first sentence, I've contextualized. I've set the scene, I've linked it in with the wording of the question. I've suggested really that I know what the question is asking me to do and what I'm talking about. I've then responded directly to the question. So I'm starting to give my opinion here on that particular question. And finally, I'm conceptualizing, so linking it in with those key ideas in Hosseini's text. For that conceptualizing section, it'll be quite specific to the text that you're writing about. So for example, with Othello, you might be writing about the kind of fundamental evil of the human soul, and will good ever be able to triumph over that? Or you might be writing about how difficult it is for an individual to survive in a world of external pressures, of prejudice, of misogyny, and so on. For A Doll's House, you might be reflecting on Ibsen's critique of the patriarchal system. For Tony Harrison, you might be writing about class conflict and how Harrison feels that that conflict is inevitable and can't be resolved. So, well, I've been thinking about using tentative and assertive language. Now, tentative language is where you're suggesting an idea. You're not stating it as a fact. And assertive language is stating an idea as being factual. Tentative language is often more appropriate to an introduction because you're setting up the question, you're setting up the ideas that you're going to explore, and then assertive language is often more appropriate to a conclusion because at that point you're giving your final answer. You've looked at all the evidence, explored all the ideas, thought about alternative interpretations, and then you're giving your answer to the question. So here I've used words like reflects on and suggests to keep it quite open, to keep it quite tentative at the beginning of my essay. So what I'd suggest you do now is pause the video, have a look at the question in the your turn column, and have a go at writing your own introduction following this pattern. Obviously, I know not everyone's doing Hosseini and the Kite Runner, so as I said, have an exam paper that's appropriate for your course in front of you and choose one of the questions for that. And then start the video again when you're ready. What we don't want, obviously, is for this to become a pattern that you feel you have to follow. So make sure that you're using this organically and flexibly to fit with your own ideas. And you don't always have to start your first sentence in the same way. So I've put a couple of different options here on the screen. So you could say, when considering Hosseini's representation of women, when exploring Harrison's representation of the working classes, in A Doll's House, Ibsen reflects on the subservience of women. So there's some different options you want to use, and here's one of those options on the screen. Again, just pause and read what I've got in the example column. So again, my first sentence, I'm contextualizing, I'm setting the scene. I'm then responding to the question. This particular argument is quite a complex one. What I'm saying is that Harrison thinks that conflict is inevitable, but that he would like to reach harmony through using his poetry as an act of rebellion to give a voice to the working classes. However, he ultimately feels that is going to fail, it's not going to work. So that then links in with that key concept in Harrison's poetry, which is about poetic voice, about the authenticity of the poetry itself. Again, I've thought about my tentative and my assertive language here. And there's a couple of points where I've been quite assertive in my introduction. And this is appropriate here because I'm stating something which is pretty clearly true. And maybe you could argue with me there, but pretty clearly true about Harrison's poetry. So that first section in blue, it is clear that Harrison focuses on the divisions between social classes. It would be difficult to argue against that, so I'm absolutely fine to be assertive there. However, that section I've highlighted in yellow, he may do this, he seems to do this, he attempts to do this. This is what I'm going to be exploring in my essay. So I'm leaving it a little bit open at the minute, and then I'll be more assertive about that when I get to my conclusion. So again, take this as an opportunity to practice, find a question that's appropriate to you, or use a question on the screen if you're studying Tony Harrison, and have a go at drafting your introduction. One final example then before we finish, and this is what you might want to write for a two-text essay. So the question is to explore the significance of conflict as presented in two political and social protest texts you've studied. So just take a moment to read my introduction. Again, what you'll see here is my contextualizing section, my respond. Obviously, I'm going to be writing about two texts here, so I need to cover both of these in my introduction. I'm using words such as both, just to give a bit of loose linking together of these particular texts. And then I'm looking at those big ideas about conflict, about marginalization, about fighting for equality. So again, now that you've read my take a moment just to think about the tentative and assertive language that I've used. I've used that assertive language when I am sure that I'm on solid ground. So Hosseini definitely critiques the unfairness of a social system. It would be difficult to argue that he doesn't do that. But later on, I've been more tentative when I'm saying that the writers may not advocate a complete dismantling of the social system, because that could potentially be a wider discussion. So take a moment to have a look at the second question, or to get an exam paper and a different question in front of you and have a go at drafting your own introduction, and then start the video again when you're ready. So what we've done today is had 3 opportunities to look at example introductions and for you to practice yours as well. Remember to be precise and concise when you're writing your introduction, and to use this as a guide for constructing this, for getting over that fear of the blank page. Don't feel like this needs to be a straitjacket or a pattern that you have to follow. You can do these things in different orders, or you could maybe merge them together. Sometimes, for example, contextualize and respond become the same thing when you're writing, but it's good to think about using this as a loose framework for you to get you started in the exam. Okay, in my next video, I'm going to be looking at how to move into writing your analytical paragraphs as you're writing the main body of your essay. So thanks very much, everyone. I've also got loads of resources available on my blog, amysmithliterature.wordpress.com, if you want to check those out.